Hi guys, I'm V aka Waldheimer, and today I'm going to do a quick walkthrough over the Octane plugin for Daz Studio. I am using Octane plugin 3.8, newest version is 4. All the settings are basically identical except that the new version has a little bit of advancement called a denoiser, so I won't be showing that, but all the settings I'm going to use here will work for your version 4 if you have that one. First of all, when you install Octane, it's going to activate and you're going to see this splash screen. When you get these green check marks, it means that your Octane is online and activated and ready to use, and you're going to get access to all of these tabs here. You can also pull up your Octane render from window panes Octane render, then dock it to your left or the right. I'll be working with Genesis 8 female character, some basic clothing, basic hair, just to see what we are going through. When we go to the preferences, here I have some things changed. Here is the automatic material updates after content loads. Considering I don't like to have many background processes, I have this unchecked. When it's checked, you're going to have all of these materials from the Daz scene automatically loaded in the materials tab. As you can see, all my materials right now are blue, which means that they aren't activated. If I open my viewport, oops, okay, I'm getting this. So that's not what we want. Another thing, when we go to the render settings, first thing we want to do is to change direct lighting to path tracing for rendering characters, and we want to change this default dimensions ratio. By default it's 720 over 480. This will override your render setting here, whatever it was in iRay, so you want to change it directly in this window. Let's set it 1200, 1500. That's kind of my standard size. Looks a lot better now. Here we have maximum samples of 1000. You can always change this down the road if your render looks grainy. When it hits 1000, you should see the progress bar here, unless you have a bug. Sometimes it says waiting and it doesn't show, but it basically should show right here. Now we've swapped to path tracing. We're going to go to our materials. Missing materials create as auto materials. This would basically happen automatically if I had it activated. Now we're going to have these materials converted by Octane. It takes a minute, you can see it here. So let's give it a minute to load. While we're waiting, there are 3 columns right here. We have the Octane render materials column, that this just populated with 25 used materials. We have scene surfaces. This shows us everything we have in the scene in alphabetical order. What's the difference between Octane render materials and scene surfaces? One material can be used by more than one surface. When you have several surfaces sharing a material, it also optimizes your render and it makes it faster to finish. Now we have our girl in color, which is a good thing. So next thing we are going to do, conversion isn't perfect. That's the first thing I'm going to say. You're going to have to adjust some settings. Here in Quick Edit, when you select a surface here, you'll have an option to edit parameters like specular level, like roughness, like bump, normal maps, or any of that. You will also have the access to Node Graph Editor. It's very similar to the shader mixer in Daz. It will open like these bricks down the road. If you learn how to use this, you will learn to compose your own materials. What this is handy for, in the NGE you can change your material types: diffuse material, glossy, specular, mix, metallic, and tone materials are the options you're going to have. Diffuse material uses only the diffuse color and bump normal maps, and the rest it doesn't have any gloss. It just uses the automatic setting for that. Glossy material is probably the most popular material out there and the closest to what we like to use in Daz. It gives you the specular level. This is the specular. You can also change specular to use it as grayscale, to use it as gray image. For an example, if you have a specular map, you can browse disk and load your specular map from your drive. You can also use it as a color, which will make your surface shine in a specific color. It really gives you like power access to all of these. You can change all of them. It goes for literally any of these sliders. You can turn them into sliders, you can turn them into color, you can use images. For now we're just gonna let it be like that. You can pause and restart your render at any point without losing any progress. If you hit live right here, it's going to load all the changes. Like for an example, if you want to change the pose of your model, it's going to load her directly into the viewport. I have it unchecked, as again, I don't like to have many background processes, but if I was going to change something in the viewport and it wouldn't reflect here, I would use this option, reload, rebuild scene. So the next things we want to look at is the environment tab. In Octane you have two different ways to light a scene. You have a default daylight environment. This is very similar to Daz's sun and sky. You can set your own time, your date. You can even change the sky color, sunset color, sky turbidity, power. You can set it lower than 1.5, that's just the default setting. You can control the sun size. Let's get some shadow here. As you can see, unlike Daz, Octane doesn't have a ground. So you are going to have to make that manually. How we are going to do this without the scene in the scene? We're going to create new primitive and we're going to use a plane. Let's say 50 meters is good enough. So as I said, now if I had live option checked, that plane would appear right away, but I don't, so I'm going to rebuild. I'm going to use that plane to create a shadow catcher. Here we go. Here's the plane. It currently has no diffuse or anything. I'm going to create this new material, auto material, by right-clicking on it. I'm going to call out my node graph editor. How we create a shadow catcher is with a diffuse material. As you can see, the specular level and all other levels are off, and I'm going to click shadow catcher on. Now I'm having my shadow and it gives me good orientation to what I'm doing here. The rest of the plane is invisible unless it catches some weird shadows, then you're going to see them in the background. Let's go back to our environment. As I said, we can control the sun size. The biggest size is 30, it creates this like very soft shadow, or you can go like this and it creates like this very strong shadow. I like to keep it like around 20, 30 because I'm a fan of soft shadows. That would be the daylight environment. We can also use the HDRI environment. HDRI can be used as just a simple diffuse color, which is useful in some cases, but it's basically just giving you the color. It doesn't have a specified source of light, so it can make your renders bland, especially if you don't have, like, as you can see, there isn't even a shadow on this one. We are going to use the option RGB image. For here, let's try our ruins from Daz. I'm going to copy where it is, just so I don't have to fish it out. In this field right here, I'm going to browse this. Oh, here we are. Here's the ruins. And now shows the biggest difference in how HDRIs are seen in Iray and how are they seen in Octane. Octane is a lot more sensitive to this, where this HDRI is very soft in Iray, it's very strong in Octane. We are going to fix this by manipulating the gamma. If I lower the gamma from 2 to 1, I'm getting more of a result like I'm getting it in Iray. We can also, as you can see, we have these options right here, power gamma, and then we're going to go to a projection, mesh UV projection. We're going to hit spherical projection, 3D rotation, XYZ. This will match the settings in Daz, in Iray. So now we can use these angles Y to rotate our environment. And we're going to find some angle that give us more of the light that we want. Let's tone this down a little bit more, or not. Okay, now we have that, and now we have like our environment, we have our render settings set to path tracing, we have all of our materials loaded. They need some, as you can see on her face, we've got some black spots that we are going to remove. But for now, let's look at this render window. What we have here, except for the live and reload and pause and continue, we have this entire menu of things on the right side. We have maximum samples set to 1000, which should be enough to finish this image. If it's not enough, you can always change the number to something else. It's not going to affect your render progress. These other settings right here in the current kernel are going to change your render progress if you change any of these. For now, unless you are familiar with the features, you don't have to. They're as good as they get in their default settings. You may want to lower. GI clamp is very high by default. It makes render go forever. You can easily set it to 10 or 20. As you can see, there is very little difference between that. When you change it, it changes your render progress. It restarts it all over again. Camera imager is basically your tone mapping. You have exposure, you have highlight compression. I can compress the highlights. It's somewhat similar to crush blacks. You can set your camera response. Do you want which way you want it here? You don't want that EGFA color. EGFA response, it's set there by default. Lots of people are going to use linear response. They say that's the most natural response you can get from 3D camera if you click on neutral response too. So it doesn't have any color. For this one, you are going to want to like manipulate a little bit of gamma to make it brighter. Maybe manipulate some exposure too. This is good enough. So now we have the HDRI, we have our girl. What I'm not happy with is right now we have only the HDRI as the source of light. I'm going to create another source of light by creating a simple primitive. Mesh lights work in Octane. Photometric lights aren't going to work in it. Same as with Hdri, if you're creating mesh lights, you want your geometry not to be too heavy. You want as little poly in these objects that are going to be emissive. Otherwise, it's going to unnecessarily prolong your render. I'm going to make this sphere bigger. Let's go back to my camera. Let's go back to here. Rebuild scene so I can see my sphere. As you can see, my sphere is loaded now in the Scene Surfaces tab, except that the material isn't loaded, so it's just going to give me a blank material. We're going to turn that sphere into the emissive light. Right now we can see the sphere there. We're going to change that. To create a new light source, you have options like simple, textured, or IES. Simple is the most simple emissive surface you can get. Textured can use colors or any kind of images, not HDRIs though. HDRIs are used in the environment tab, but like you can use a colored map to create more interesting light, and IES is for IES profiles. We're going to just use the simple light. As you can see, it's already giving us a little bit of light here. What's very cool about Octane, you can completely hide this sphere and get it to provide light. We are going to set opacity to 0. Light is still there, sphere is invisible. By default it's 100 watts. We can tone it down to 50 as our girl is right now pretty much burnt out. We can lower the environment as well to give it like a more dramatic thing. Here we go, this looks nice. These settings basically you don't have to fiddle around too much. You can change your temperature. Same values apply as they do in, now you see it's yellowish light, 6500 is that neutral white that we like. Anything over it is going to turn blue and such. Let's get this exposure. Here we go, that looks pretty decent so far. One more thing is, as you can, actually there isn't much in the scene to notice, but Octane has this very smart autofocus. By default it's using single point autofocus. You can change it to area autofocus, or you can get it from Daz camera. Where you are getting it from Daz camera is how you would set up the DOF in Hdri or in Daz in general too. You will go here, you will activate depth of field, you will center it a little bit how you like it. Let's put it somewhere like in the middle of her face. Let's set this to not 50, 20, 50. Okay. So now we have the DOF, how we're setting it in Daz. You will see these other options are now available under camera settings, and they are Octane options. There is plenty of settings to play with to see what they do. Right now I am just going to like use it to center, get from Daz camera, to center that DOF more on my model instead of using the autofocus from Octane. If you click on this little camera icon right here, Octane Render f-stop is 4 by default. It's also available here. You can change it here or you can change it here. Same thing, it will be connected because now it's getting values from the S-Cam. As you can see, now it's changing. Smaller autofocus is going to have more things blurred. Bigger autofocus is gonna have more things cleared out. 4 or 3 is quite bits enough for what we're doing here. Now let's see, we have an issue here. We have our hair not playing well with our model, and that's probably because the bumps on the model skin have loaded too high of a value. We're going to check that. If you use the surface selector, it's going to do a very nice thing. It's going to select it here too. Here we are. Okay, it's back to autofocus. It's gonna clear out in a second. Here it is. So what we have here in the face, and I want to change that right away, this bump is definitely too high. You want bumps at like 0.1, not at 0.6. Octane is very sensitive to this. If your bump is too high, it can poke through the clothes. As you can see, different body parts had it loaded differently. We're just going to set those all lower and lower. I'm not going to go too much into the skin shader. We're just going to play like the one we currently have is the one that we like. And as you can see now, that black blotches that we had the cap of the hair poking through the bump is now gone. Let's go a step. As we can see, this hair has several groups of materials. I'm trying to see if I can group them together so I don't have this many. Probably not such a great idea, but let's hope they all have the same transparency map is the only thing that yeah, that doesn't look too bad. Right now this has loaded as mixed material. Mixed material is created here from diffuse and glassy material. Each one of them, and the amount is 1, which makes no sense. The amount should be like 0.5 or 0.75, like anything in the mix. Like you can't mix two materials at the highest value, you have to give them some ratio. Anyhow, we are going to go with the simple glossy material and just drop this diffuse material entirely, because we don't want to get too complicated. Now we have some specularity here, which we like. Let's say set specular level a little bit lower. Let's get roughness a little bit higher, so it doesn't reflect like a mirror. Like the culprit of the Daz models in Octane is pretty much the skin and the eyes. So right here we're going to try and make our eyes look better. Right now they have no reflection, they have no life in them. If you go to the live database, you can use any of these shaders. You can filter by name. Let's say I want, if I click like water here, or glass, either or would work. We're going to convert it into one of these specular materials. Let's do the water and put it on eye moisture here too. We want fake shadows on. It's a specular material unless we want it to refract forever. There we go. Until it clears out. There are lots of like cheats and tricks and like those fake shadows and stuff like that that can make your life a lot easier. Let's also try to put it on the cornea. Now we have like our irises and pupils and the sclera. You can, let's say I want sclera a little bit brighter. I'm gonna lower the gamma to 2. Let's do the same for iris. We want that, although her eyes in this case are brown, I want the color to pop out so it doesn't look like she's got 2 buttons over there. That should be good enough. Now let's go back to our full body. And here we have our first render in Octane. Next thing, like this is with mostly the default values, we just changed what was problematic. As for the skin, there's a lot of skin shaders even available in database. If you want to play with them, just type skin. There are some pretty cool people who have provided these. Lots of them are different, so you may want to look into them. You may want to you may want to try different ones and stuff like that. For now, I'm pretty happy how this looks, considering this is supposed to be our walkthrough. When we are done with our render or we want to save an image, we can go here, save as PNG, 8-bit or 16-bit. If you have any render passes, you can export all of them as separate images. When you click here, it's gonna lead you to your saving folder. Is there anything else? Yeah, I want to compress some highlights to give her a thing like this. So that's pretty much the beginner's guide to Octane plugin. These are, of course, none of these are advanced settings or advanced features. This is just to get us going. So I hope you like this video. If you have any suggestions, any requests, feel free to comment or to message me. and see you all next time. Thank you and bye bye.